You ready? Welcome everybody to the Planning Advisory Committee, May 5th, 2026. I'll call the meeting to order. And I would like to acknowledge that this meeting is being acknowledged that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Right now, I will review the procedure for public to address the committee. An opportunity will be provided to all citizens to address the committee on each agenda item shown on this agenda or added to the agenda by the committee. Individuals who wish to address the committee are asked to note the following. On each matter of the committee agenda, the chair will seek public comment upon completion of staff's presentation. Each person shall state their name. All statements and questions shall be directed to the chairperson. Presentations shall be limited to 10 minutes. Persons wishing to address the committee a second time will be given opportunity to do so once all others in attendance have had the opportunity to address the committee. Persons addressing the committee for a second time shall limit their presentation to 5 minutes. Okay. So first on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? By Councillor Smith, seconded by Mr. Drysdale. All those in favor? We have nobody on Teams, right? No? Okay, so approval of the minutes of Thursday, December the 11th, 2025, and you received those by email. Motion, do I need a motion to approve those or just accept them? Any changes to the minutes? No? They're approved. Okay. So now we're going to 5.1, Cluster Development, 475 Upper Branch Road, Wallville. And it's an update from Jeff Merrill.
I can just give the committee a quick update since your last meeting. At your meeting, the developer mentioned, or the developer's consultant mentioned about getting a level 2 water study completed. That's since been completed. Staff recently received a copy of that and are circulating that along with a revised site plan to the external agencies. So once we receive comment back from those agencies, we will bring that forward.
Thank you. Just move on. So right now we are going to go to the planning matters and 6.1 municipal-wide planning use planning project, resident feedback on draft 2. And we are going to read. Oh.
Good evening, everyone.
Rosemary. Sorry, Rosemary.
That's okay.
Okay.
My name is Rosemary Young, and I'm a Planner 1 with the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. I'm joined by my colleagues today, Ella Gindy, Planner 2, and Reed Shepard, Deputy Director of Planning and Development Services. Tonight, we are here to present on the public input we received on draft number 2 of the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw, as well as recommendations for a third and final draft. Here's an overview of tonight's agenda. We will discuss an overview of the engagement conducted, key themes emerging from the engagement, recommended changes for draft 3, and our next steps.
If I could just interrupt, I forgot to tell the committee members that you can ask questions during the presentation for clarification, so we don't have to ask to go back 20 slides. Okay, thank you.
Yes, perfect. And I was just about to add that questions are encouraged throughout the presentation. There will be opportunities to discuss each of the recommended changes in more detail as we progress. And by the end of this presentation, PAC will be able to decide on whether to recommend that Council approve the revisions suggested by planning staff for a third and final draft of the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw. So how did we get here? In 2018, the province required all municipalities to adopt planning documents and zoning. The new documents must meet statements of provincial interest and minimum planning requirements, with additional opportunities to address topics such as environmental protection, heritage, and transportation. Modal is the last municipality in the province to implement this requirement. The project involves the creation of 2 documents, a municipal planning strategy and a land use bylaw. A municipal planning strategy sets the vision for the municipality through policies, and the land use bylaw implements the policies through regulations, general provisions, and zones. Zoning regulates land use by dividing these areas into zones focused on different types of uses. So how will this project affect residents and properties? All properties will be zoned. Zoning in existing planned areas will largely remain unchanged, and zoning rules can and will be changed over time as needed. Existing uses and buildings can continue to exist without any need to change. These are referred to as lawfully existing uses in the draft documents. A legal non-conforming use or building, often called a grandfathered use, is still allowed and can be fixed and rebuilt, and in most cases also expanded. Future uses and buildings will need to follow the new rules. So where are we in the process? We're nearing the end of this project. We have recently wrapped up public engagement on the second drafts of the Municipal Planning Strategy and Land Use Bylaw, which were released to the public towards the end of February 2026. So to recap, the purpose of this presentation is to summarize the public feedback received on draft 2 of the planning documents, communicate recommended changes for a third and final draft of the planning documents, and provide an updated work plan outlining the remaining steps of the project. But the ultimate goal is to provide PAC with the information needed to decide on whether to recommend that Council approve the revisions recommended by planning staff noted in the report and summarized in this presentation. And the motion will be posted at the very end of this presentation as well, and PAC may choose to pass this motion or revise the motion then. So for draft 2, engagement took place over March and April, and the goal was really to give people a few different ways to review the documents and share their feedback. We didn't rely on just one format. We held 8 public sessions across the municipality with 194 attendees in total, both in person and online. Attendance varied by location, with the highest turnout in Northfield and New Germany. People could also participate through the Engage page or by sending in comments by email or in writing. At the in-person sessions, we had plain language materials and maps to help walk people through the changes and answer questions directly. Overall, the approach was meant to be flexible and accessible and to give people options for how they wanted to engage. This slide provides a bit more detail on engagement during draft 2. Social media was one of several tools we used to communicate and promote the project. In total, there were 10 posts, which generated nearly 40,000 impressions. Planning staff also received 27 direct emails, 7 online comments, and 13 written comments from the open houses. While the number of formal submissions is relatively modest, many residents chose to engage through conversations at the in-person sessions. Overall, engagement took a variety of forms, with people participating in different ways depending on what worked best for them. So now we'll dive into the key themes emerging from this period of public engagement, along with recommendations from planning staff for a third and final draft of the MPS and LUB. In the report, you'll see a detailed list of all of the suggested changes emerging from council, public, PAC, and staff input, each accompanied by a staff recommendation. We recognize that this is an extensive list. As a result, with this presentation, we synthesized the input and recommendations based on what we heard from the public and others. Through this presentation, we are aiming to help identify and communicate the changes that are most discussion-worthy and also give you a sense of those proposed changes that are less substantive from a planning perspective. And as mentioned, please feel free to answer questions throughout, and the motion itself will be again presented at the end. So just moving on to the general direction we heard from about draft 2. Generally, we heard that draft 2 was seen as an improvement from draft 1. People appreciated the more streamlined and simplified approach, and there's still strong interest in a minimum planning approach, which is what we heard after the draft 1 engagement as well. At the same time, some participants noted that the draft represents a shift towards a more urban approach. So overall, we heard a mix of positive feedback on direction, with some ongoing concerns about how the second draft might contribute to community change and be implemented in practice. The municipality also received correspondence raising concerns about the coastal flood risk area regulations. It's important to note that these regulations are already in effect since 2024 and were not a focus of this project. The public was not informed that the coastal regulations may be reconsidered through this project and have not been given opportunity to review or provide input on the existing regulations in that context. Council also passed a motion to revisit these regulations in 2029. As a result, planning staff do not recommend changes to the coastal protection regulations at this time. So housing was the theme that emerged from the public engagement conducted in March and April of 2026. Draft 2 adopted a permissive approach towards housing, aiming to permit a variety of housing options. However, we did hear some comments about the safety of tiny houses on wheels and other structures on wheels, such as recreational vehicles when used for habitation. As a result, planning staff recommend updating the definition of recreational vehicle to reference specific standards. We also recommend updating the definition of tiny house to indicate that the tiny house must be on a foundation. And are there any questions?
Okay, Councillor Smith.
I'm just wondering what the impact of that is on tiny houses. Does that mean, what does that mean for tiny houses that are on wheels? And also, what does it mean for septic for tiny homes? Does that change?
So I can start and then maybe Reid can supplement. So tiny houses on wheels would not be permitted under how we've proposed it's written. Tiny houses would be permitted on a foundation, and that could take multiple forms, such as slab. It doesn't have to be a permanent foundation, so there are lower cost alternatives that someone could take the wheels off and put the tiny house on a foundation. In terms of septic, there would be no requirements around septic from a municipal level. Septic is typically regulated through provincial jurisdiction, and maybe I'll pass it to Reid if he has anything to.
Sure. I guess the intention was we did a little bit more digging, and the building code has sufficient allowances to build tiny homes that makes special kind of consideration for things like stairways and sizes of doorways and rooms and things like that. So there are new building code allowances to allow people to build tiny homes that meet code. So that, but as you probably would know, having wheels on a structure makes it not fall into the building code, and then places it in a kind of gray area about is it safe to live in? Is it safe to occupy? So the intention here is to encourage people to build tiny homes that meet building code. And the way to do that would be, they can certainly transport it wherever they want on wheels, but the idea is take those wheels off so that it can then therefore be inspected to meet all the building code requirements. And then that of course triggers the septic requirements as any other dwelling. And then we're all set to go. So as part of this, Rosemary's going to also touch on RVs. So recognizing RVs are a use, and that tiny homes are a use as well, but tiny homes on wheels is something that we wanted to separate out from this project.
Okay. Again?
Sorry, just to follow up, will there be a non-conforming use for tiny homes that are currently on wheels, or will this apply?
Yeah, exactly. So any situation that exists today would be grandfathered if it's there today. Yep.
Okay. Mr. Drysdale?
There's curiosity. The way it's written, it's not crystal clear that it can't be on wheels. It insinuates that it can't be on wheels. So the real concern I've got, though, is I show up with my tiny home on wheels that I've already spent a ton of money on to build, and you're now telling me I can't use it. That doesn't seem to kind of meet the intent of what we're trying to do here.
I guess the way we want to look at it is if someone was in that situation, hopefully it's a simple process of just removing those wheels, and therefore having building code doesn't require that you have a full poured foundation or anything. There's different ways to have that. It's just as long as it's sitting on the ground. And the intention, I guess, of this overall process here would be to inform people about what's being proposed, bring the regulations in with advance notice, and then tell people what's happening. And if something already exists, of course, as we mentioned, it's grandfathered. So we definitely want to make sure people know what's being proposed, and then recognizing whatever exists today can continue in the future.
Okay. Anybody else before we continue? Okay, continue, Rosemary.
So as Reed mentioned, recreational vehicles are also a piece as part of this. Planning staff also heard from members of the public and from counselors that the approach for regulating recreational vehicles in Draft 2 might unnecessarily negatively impact individuals who are using a recreational vehicle for a seasonal or recreational purpose. As a result, planning staff recommend expanding the number of days individuals can inhabit a recreational vehicle without requiring a development permit from 90 days to 150 or 180 days. After 150 or 180 days, a resident would need to obtain a development permit to confirm compliance with the residential setbacks of the zone it falls within.
We will go, I'll go with Mr. Mailman first.
So my question would be is, what if there is already an existing dwelling on the property and the RV is for a family member who can't afford a property somewhere else?
So the individual would still be permitted to inhabit that recreational vehicle. What this is saying is that after 150 or 180 days, they would just need to obtain a development permit in order to ensure compliance with residential setbacks of that property.
Go ahead.
And what restrictions would be on that development permit?
Just that they meet the residential setbacks of that zone.
Mr. Drysdale?
This is a clerical point in your report that you provided. You told us that you were going to change the number of days, went from 90 days, but you didn't put the 2 on, so you may just want to update your report.
Thank you. Anybody else? Continue, Rosemary.
So there were also a number of comments related to agriculture and natural resources. For example, received several comments against the removal of the animal count approach that was in Draft 1. However, as the level of engagement was much lower for Draft 2 than Draft number 1, throughout the course of the project, staff heard overwhelmingly more, that residents of MODL do not want livestock regulations in the planning documents. As a result, planning staff do not recommend reintroducing the animal count approach. We also received some comments from residents who requested that their property be removed from the rural agricultural potential zone due to factors such as topography. However, staff do not recommend this, as it is important to apply the criteria used for the rural agricultural potential zone consistently. Staff also received concerns about the phase timing for subdivision within the rural agricultural potential zone, where a subdivision is limited to a maximum of 2 lots per calendar year, up to a maximum of 6 lots total. Residents wondered why the policy couldn't allow all 6 lots to be subdivided in 1 year.
Mr. Drysdale, and then Mr. Mailman.
And could you tell us the reason?
So the rationale was really, with the limit on 2 lots per year, was to permit, for example, a family member who wanted to subdivide their property for a family member to do so, but to discourage larger scale development. And maybe Reed can supplement with.
No, I think that's good. Yep.
Mr. Mailman?
I hear what you said, but to me, that makes no sense if you're going to permit up to 6 at some point in time, and if somebody wants to do that all at once, to restrict it to 2, makes no sense.
Okay, continue.
We also received comments from councillors about the fact that there seemed to be no limit to the size and scale of cluster developments within the rural agricultural potential zone in Draft 2. Councillors indicated that this seemed to contradict the intention to protect agricultural lands. As a result, planning staff recommend adding a policy to the MPS regulating the size and scale of cluster developments in the rural agricultural potential zone.
Mr. Drysdale, and then Councillor Smith.
So from your report, you comment that there would be a maximum of 12 units. But if I'm in a rural agricultural potential zone, I can subdivide my land down 6 times. So now I can build 72 units. It's going to take me a few years to do it, but I can build 72 units.
Based on, yes.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think there's different hypothetical situations that depend on individual properties. There's also a policy that beyond that, that we've also kind of put together. Some of this is framed on similar policies that the municipality of the County of Colchester has in place, which we look to for something similar. And there's also something there about when somebody is doing a cluster development in that zone, that it not just be laid out similar to a subdivision, that those buildings actually be clustered on the property with the intent of preserving the remainder of that as agricultural land. So there is additional policy there that if you're doing a cluster development in those areas, you can't do it the same as you would a traditional subdivision layout, that it does need to be clustered. By using that style of development, it does allow you to bring those dwellings a lot closer together and leave the remainder of the property in either a natural state, or if it's agricultural land, then you can leave it as agricultural land.
Can you put your mic a little closer to you, Mr. Doyle?
Okay.
Thank you.
I think I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that's going to stop somebody that wants to do multiple developments, because he's got an allowed use to subdivide his property up to 6 times. So if he's smart, he would figure out a way to build 6 12-unit cluster developments meeting all of your rules, but I don't think that's really the intent of what we're trying to do with the rural agricultural potential zone. I'm just trying to preemptively not let this happen.
Yeah, and I guess what I would say is, we know there are some limitations to the framework that's being suggested here. I guess the primary driver behind, using up agricultural land that we see is typical subdivision development of residential. So that's really been the approach that is being used with this plan to try to protect that, is really to focus on subdivision of residential lots. Cluster development, I think rightly so, was pointed out as a possible problem area where we might see a shift in using that type of development to get around that. So we, identified that and included something there to speak to a maximum number of units per lot. But yeah, we're always going to run into that situation where if a lot exists, it can be cut up and then you can do different things on each of those smaller lots. People can build multi-unit buildings on individual lots in that rural agricultural potential zone without running into any things stopping them as well. So there's certainly limitations that's here. The limit that we introduced there around 12 units, I mean, that doesn't have to be 12. It could be 10, it could be 8. I don't know that there's a perfect number there either, but we certainly recognize it's not a kind of foolproof plan. We're trying to target, where we see the biggest problem areas, I guess.
Okay. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, I have a couple questions around the zone. So when subdividing the zone, is there a minimum size that each lot has to be? Does each lot have to be 4 hectares? Or can a 4-hectare lot be broken into 6 pieces?
I don't know I don't know the minimum lot size off my head, but it would be just as required for a residential development. So if the question you're asking, yeah, I don't want to quote you a number. We'll look it up to confirm while I'm just mentioning this. But if we're talking about, how many residential lots somebody could create with that maximum of 6 over 2 per year over 3 years, it would be the minimum lot size would be, the standard size would be required for a residential use. That's usually dictated by what the septic system requirements are by environment. And that's gonna be telling what the minimum lot size would be.
Yeah, I guess, I just, with the cluster developments with 12 units, in lots that may be smaller than 4 hectares, I'm just trying to picture, what could that mean on different lots? It sounds like you could actually not have a ton of leftover room, like even if you use the conservation design, you might not have a ton of room left over for preserving farmland.
The minimum lot area is 2,700 square meters in square feet. Oh, it's 2.7 hectares.
Okay. Do you have more questions, Councillor Smith?
So what would be the process? I understand some people are not happy that their properties are landing in this zone, and would like to know the process for rezoning, because I think that would be the process that they would be offered. So I guess I'm wondering, you know, cost, time, what would be the considerations for rezoning to be allowed or not allowed?
Just to, I don't know if I can answer all of those questions at this moment, but yeah, I guess the first point is anyone can apply to rezone something at any time. That's always within their ability and their right to do. It becomes a decision of council whether to allow someone to rezone something, and they'll be looking to staff to make a recommendation about whether that should go ahead, and then it's ultimately up to council to do that. In terms of what kind of, I'm just looking for, there's a policy here, but what would be the criteria? It basically demonstrating, is there actually not those agricultural soils on that property? And that would be a case to say, well, actually, this shouldn't be in that zone because we don't have those soils here. So it would be a matter of demonstrating that that's the case, and then that would be the kind of rationale behind making that application. Timelines, I don't know if we say 4 to 6 months typically on a rezoning application. I don't know the cost off the top of my head. It's not substantial, but again, it's a council decision about whether to rezone a property. So there's always going to be an opportunity for people to apply for that.
Okay.
And just to add, policy LUD 18 in the proposed draft 2 says that council may permit rezoning of lands from rural agricultural zone to another zone based on consideration of an agricultural impact assessment report that has been prepared and signed by a qualified professional at the expense of the property owner. The report must document the Canada Land Inventory soil classification applicable to the land, implications of fragmenting its agricultural use, availability of services, and compatibility of potential alternative uses, such as residential uses that may conflict with established agricultural operations.
Are you finished? Yes. Mr. Mellon?
So when Councillor Smith asked about the size for subdividing a residential lot, you said 2,700 meters, so that's 29,062 and a half square feet, so just over a half an acre. Is there a minimum size that would be required for a 12-unit building?
No, there's not. No, it would be just dictated by the servicing ability. So you can certainly subdivide that, but when you go to do that building, if you can't support it, if you don't have the room for a septic system, then you rub it into that problem later on.
Okay, continue, Rosemary.
Staff also received a number of comments related to the proposed environmental protection regulations. Feedback included comments about increasing or reducing the setbacks for inland watercourses and wetlands. Planning staff do not recommend adjusting these setbacks that were proposed in Draft 2. Draft 2 also established flexibility for undersized lots from the setbacks near inland watercourses and wetlands. Comments about a minimum setback for undersized lots near inland wetlands and watercourses. Planning staff recommend establishing a minimum setback for these undersized lots.
Okay. Continue.
Comments also noted that additions to existing buildings near inland wetlands and watercourses should be permitted on the sides rather than requiring extensions towards the rear. As a result, planning staff recommend revising the language related to legal nonconforming provisions to clarify allowances for existing structures located near inland watercourses and inland wetlands.
Okay.
Planning staff also received comments indicating that the 100-meter separation distance for new fencing containing pasturing and grazing farm animals within the protected watershed overlay may be too restrictive and may represent more of an urban approach to planning. Staff do not recommend changing this part of Draft 2. Staff also received questions about whether there would be flexibility from the setbacks for undersized lots within the protected watershed overlay. To maintain consistency with the approach for inland watercourses and wetlands outside of the overlay, staff recommend adding flexibility to the setbacks for undersized lots in the watershed overlay as well.
Any questions? Mr. Drysdale.
I'm struggling. I can't seem to find what your setbacks are in the report that you sent us.
The proposed setbacks for inland watercourses is a 20-meter setback and a 15-meter vegetative buffer.
Okay. Okay.
Now we'll transition to what we are considering non-substantive changes. And this is not to say that these proposed changes are not important, but rather that they may be less discussion-worthy from a planning perspective. So regarding mapping, we received feedback about the need for a clearer zoning map, as well as improvements to the interactive zoning map and the environmental features map. Planning staff recommend these changes. Planning staff also recommend adding or clarifying a number of definitions, such as places of assembly, flankage, sleeping unit, and more detail on those definitions is listed in the report. Staff also recommend a number of other non-substantive changes, all of which are detailed in the report in the table, including, for example, adding a policy to the municipal planning strategy to align with the active transportation policy. Now we'll transition to next steps. So following this meeting, the project will be entering its final stages. There will be a council meeting after this PAC meeting in mid-May. Council will receive PAC's recommendation and then provide final direction to staff on the edits to be made in the third and final draft. After that, the aim would be to hold first reading in June 2026. And here's the motion that's in the report today. That concludes today's presentation.
I don't want that motion until after.
We are open to any further questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rosemary. Now, we will let the public have their say right now, and then we'll come back to the committee. So how many people do we have in the gallery that would like to speak? And you have 10 minutes to do so. We have 1, 2, 3. Ladies first. And you can state your name. Can you turn that on for her? On? Okay.
We're good?
Yeah.
Thank you for taking your time tonight with my presentation. To the chair and to all of you members. Sorry, I've got wrong glasses here, so I'm struggling a bit. So my name is Janine Sutherland. I'm from 693 Mason Beach Road, Unit 5. And I'm here tonight representing Little Hook Properties, our 14 owners at the site, and a wider coalition of 62 property owners across Lunenburg County. I'm here to put a human and financial face to the 3.97 meter coastal flood risk area that planning staff are recommending you lock in tonight. Staff has advised you that these regulations are working as intended and that you should wait until 2029 to review them. I'm here to tell you that waiting 4 years is not an option because this unverified map is destroying family equity and local development today. Recently, I went to the bank to simply transfer one of our properties into my name. I was shocked by the response. The bank said no. And I said, why? Because Model has, CMHC would not support the financing because the municipality has published a map placing us in the severe red zone. Think about this devastating ripple effect of that. If I can't get a CMHC banking to buy my own property, how can a local family ever hope to buy a home here? If standard financing is denied, the only people who can buy homes in the red zone are people with incredibly deep pockets or who can pay cash. By drawing this unengineered boundary without consulting the financial sector, this municipality is wiping out the proof of everyday homebuyers, or the pool of everyday homebuyers. You are actively rendering our properties unmortgageable, and you are slashing our loan-to-value rates in half. Insurance for these properties. Model has formally branded our land as a severe flood risk. The insurance industry is reacting. National reports from the Intact Center on Climate Adaptation warn that when municipalities draw these blunt hazard lines, homes face extreme private insurance premiums or a total denial, which is happening. We are seeing insurance values spike right now. Families can't afford to pay peak property taxes on land that your zoning has made functionally uninsurable and unsellable. How is that good business for Model, for taxes? Imagine being in our shoes. We did everything right. We raised our property to meet the published provincial data from 2023 to 3.02 meter standard base on the Nova Scotia Coastal Hazard Maps, which was done by the CBCL engineers for the entire province of Nova Scotia. We invested heavily to meet the standard that the province set, and now Model has arbitrarily added an entire extra meter on top of that, pushing the line to 3.9 meters without a single professional engineer's stamp. And we passed around to Tom the engineer's stamp from CBCL for the Mahone Bay. And the Mahone Bay restructuring that they're doing right now has an engineer's stamp on it. That's all we're asking for Model to do for us. We want those engineers to tell us that 3.97 is way out of line, to tell you that 3.97 is out of line. What's happening is that you are treating it like a bathtub and assuming that the water rises to 3.97 meters everywhere. Physics doesn't work like that. And to prove this, the Mahone Bay flood prevention will prove that when, you can all look at that document that we have circulated. And it shows on pages 18 to 26 that the report, coastal engineers detail the science of the wave run-up. They prove that while a 100-year storm waves out in the ocean might reach 14 meters high, the shallow ocean floor and local geography cause those waves to lose their energy. By the time they hit Mahone Bay shore, those waves drop to less than a single meter. Imagine, 14 meters to a single meter. Because of this, Mahone Bay engineers proved that safe building elevations vary drastically everywhere within the same harbor. If professional engineers proved that wave run-up changes property by property right next door in Mahone Bay, it's scientifically invalid for Model to impose a blanket 3.97 meter line across the entirety of Lunenburg County. We're not asking you to ignore the environment. We're asking you to let us use science. Please do not vote to delay this for 4 years. We ask that you amend draft 2 tonight to include an engineering override clause. Allow property owners to hire licensed coastal engineers to conduct site-specific wave-up calculations. Let the professionals stamp our properties as safe based on actual ground truth data. Thank you for your time, and I ask that my written submission and the attached position, which we passed over to Tom, be entered into the record of this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Did you want to speak? No. Oh, okay. So we have 2 gentlemen left. Which one wants to go first? And I'll get you to state your name.
Good evening. My name is David Collins. I live at 2736 Highway 332 in Bayport. Further to what Ms. Sutherland was saying, I have a property that is very, very much affected by the 3.97. My biggest concern is where you are getting this number from. I looked at the provincial maps this afternoon, and their total projected flood elevations with highest tide, storm surge, and so on, currently is 1.79. In 2050 is 2.09, and in 2100 is 3.05. With all of those numbers, my dwelling is basically flood-free. The 2100 just catches the corner of the house and catches part of my garage, which is, there's no basement and no dwelling in it, so really not a major issue. With 3.97, it basically includes my entire house, my entire garage, and the large portion of my property extending beyond that, which will affect insurability. It will affect mortgage if I want to sell it. And sorry folks, but I'm 77 years old. I'm not going to be living there forever. I am going to be looking at selling it, and this action of going to the 3.97, I really think is going to impact the value of my property, whether it's mortgageable, whether it's insurable. And I really would ask that you rethink this, especially considering that it is well in excess of what the province is currently saying. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. David.
Thank you. So, my name is Nathan Staling. I'm also at 693 Masons Beach Road. And, well, the planning staff is recommending that the council wait 4 to 5 years to review this 3.97 meter line. But I urge you to put yourselves in my shoes So what happens to our families in the meantime? If I need to sell my investment now, I simply can't. It doesn't make sense. It is incredibly frustrating being young, and the provincial government intentionally designed a slow rollout for coastal regulations, and their sliding scale, present day 2050 to 2100, was put in place so homeowners could actually adapt over time without our equity being destroyed overnight. We even invested our own money to raise our property to match the 3.02 meters. But MODL threw out the provincial playbook and instantly enforced an extreme 3.97 meter red zone. Here is the real world consequence of that decision. Because banks and CMHC are reacting instantly to your new flood map, I now have an asset that requires a 20% to 40% deposit for a buyer to get financing, rather than reflecting its true present day value. A young family who could have bought my property for under $500,000 with a standard mortgage yesterday is now completely locked out, and I cannot sell to future buyers who need affordable housing the most. We just want fair, localized science, which is why, why did MODL use extreme outlier data from the Bay of Fundy or Hurricane Juan instead of hiring a firm like CBCL to do localized wave run-up measurements, just like Mahone Bay did? If MODL is going to freeze our economic value for the next half decade, I asked how the municipality plans to address the property taxes on the equity that has been erased. But more importantly, I respectfully urge you to not lock us into a 5-year freeze based on administrative guess. Please amend draft 2 tonight to allow for site-specific engineering overrides. Let's use real science so we aren't trapped in our own homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Is there anyone else in the gallery that would like to come forward? No? Okay, now we will go back to the committee, and you can have your, what's it called? Debate, yeah, that's the word. Do you want me to do that now? Okay, I think the best thing for us to do is to put the motion on the floor and then debate it. So I would ask Councillor Bell to put the motion on the floor, please.
I would not want to put it on the floor yet. I wanted to ask a question, if I am permitted to do so.
Yep.
It's about a non-substantive consideration. If we go back to draft 1, 7.30.1, it had to do with illumination of properties. This was an independent clause, and I'd like to hear what other members of the PAC think about the matter before I just let it go. Now, if this committee feels there is any concrete reason to reconsider this matter as an independent clause, it can easily be put back into draft 3. I'm good either way, but I wanted to have the feeling of the committee's concern and input to this matter. And to be more precise, if I was asking for a development agreement to be processed, suppose I want to enlarge an existing business or build a new business like a service station or a building supply facility. In that development agreement, there is a clause that regulates the type of lighting that I may have on my parking lot or on the building or on the type of sign in front. And this is so that it doesn't create inconvenience or discomfort to the neighboring properties, and also for signage for whether it creates a glare on the highway or anything like that. And I know that in the past, in development agreements, we have included these clauses, and I won't name businesses, but if I do need to for clarity, I certainly will. So I just have the concern that was brought to me where homes that are in a residential area, if another residential property puts ridiculous lighting on their property that others feel inconvenienced by? Is this something that we want to consider in this policy? And it was important enough to be put in the first draft, but in trying to make it simplified, we left it out of this draft. And I'm just wondering if that's something that we should be considering. And this, I felt, was the committee where I'd like to hear their input. If they're not for it, then I'm fine. But if they think it should be warranted for further discussion, before, this would be the last opportunity to address it. So that completes what I wanted to bring,
Thank you, Councillor.
if I'm within order for bringing this consideration.
I think he's looking forward. Do you have anything, Jeff?
Just to clarify, I have the clause here in front of me, if that's helpful to clarify what it says. So draft 1, it was the general provision section, so 7.30 was called illumination. And what it said was that exterior lighting on a lot must be directed away from adjoining properties and streets. So it was basically saying you can't have a big light shining on your neighbors, it needs to be shining on your own property. That's all it says.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody want to discuss what Councillor Bell brought forward? Have input? Councillor Smith?
Was there a reason that it was taken out? Was it just the level of detail in the plan that you were looking to simplify? Because I'm fine with having it brought back into draft 2 or recommending that it go forward.
Yeah, I can clarify. So there was a lot, that was one of those things that was taken out to simplify the document, along with things like the whole signage section that was kind of similar. So yeah, it was just removed for simplicity.
Mr. Drysdale?
I would assume then if we put it back in, anybody who had an existing property would be grandfathered.
That's correct.
Okay, so if it was a standalone bylaw, can you get around that grandfathering part? Because like I can say right now, I've got spotlights shining into my yard. So it wouldn't matter whether it was in or out of the bylaws because they're grandfathered.
That's maybe a question I might pose to Tom in terms of other bylaw options.
Yep, so I didn't think I'd get to speak tonight. If it's the municipality, I'll throw out some Latin this evening. The municipality doesn't have the ability to implement a bylaw nunc pro tunc, which means now for then. Only the federal government can do that. So generally, anything that's existing lawfully today can't be made unlawful by the acts of the municipality. They can change the rules on a go-forward basis, but they can't make it retroactive. So it wouldn't matter so much where it's in the bylaw, but the MGA has specific provisions for municipal planning strategies and land use bylaws for non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures. It's commonly referred to as a grandfathering clause, but the MGA does specifically provide for those in the planning documents.
So I have an important point to make here. This may all be a moot discussion, and I apologize for the confusion, but it is in the second draft.
Oh, okay.
We didn't get rid of it. We moved it.
Mm-hmm.
It is still there in its form. So perhaps that solves that question, but that's what it is. It's now called 7.20.
can you refer to the section that it's in?
7.20, I think.
Yeah.
7.20?
Yeah, that's page 57 at the bottom.
Page 57 at the bottom, if anybody wants to look that up for sure. So I guess, go ahead.
It wasn't my plan to disrupt anything here. It's just that sometimes we miss these things and then it's really hard to get
Yep.
them back in.
That's right.
And I was prepared to speak about the three allowances before, where we gave a consideration at a commercial level, but that won't be necessary.
Right.
I'm glad to see it's still there,
Good.
but I guess I didn't read draft 2 as closely as I should have.
Okay. Mr. Mailman.
Thank you. It's nothing to do with what Mr. Bell had brought up, but before we read the motion, I do want to ask a couple questions for clarification, especially since I'm a public appointee and I was prior to 2024, and from the presentations we heard, it does, I do have a couple of questions that I wanted to propose, and I think I need to ask all the questions in a group so it makes sense. But so the province said to have a 3.02 meter setback. The municipality looked at 3.97 and passed that. My question is, why did the municipality go against the province? And what benefit does it have for the residents and the municipality to have an increase more than what the provincial government proposed? And then since it's already been passed, does this committee with the land use bylaws have any, can that be changed through this land use bylaw where Modo has already made the motion and have passed it to be 3.97? I guess my question is, would the land use bylaw document trump that, or is that something that council would have to go back and look at?
I can answer that. I think that you asked a few questions in one. So I can start with the first one, which is the rationale for the 3.97 meters in comparison to the province number. The number that the province was using or is using is based on the initial number that they assessed during their initial assessment of the Coastal Protection Act, which since then been removed and is not in effect, or was not ever in effect. The number that they've been using for sea level rise is based on a report by the IPCC, so the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change. And they used an older report, which is called the AR5. And the emission scenarios based that they've been calculating the sea level rise for 2050 or 2100 is based on an emission scenarios from 2005, so a very old model. The number that we've been using for sea level rise is a different number because we've been using the IPCC report AR6, which was the newer report by the UN, which is the same organization. And the emission scenarios is more updated with more data, so it's more, they have more data-based, their assessments of the sea level rise is based on better data that was out there. And also, we have not reduced our emissions, we only increase the emissions as we go forward further. So the report that we've been using to base our sea level rise looks at sea level rise emissions or scenarios that were done around 2015. So we are using newer data. That's why our number is higher. Addition to that, the province also used more generalized information for their storm surge or the higher high water large tide, which we can call it in simpler terms, spring tides. Their numbers altogether got into that 3.2 number of a sea level rise scenario by 2100. We used more localized data, so the spring tide number that we've been using is from Department of Fisheries and Ocean, from an infrastructure that is located right here in Riverport, and the number shows 70 centimeters. In addition to that, like any other municipality in the province that does have coastal protection regulations, they have been using Hurricane Juan numbers for storm surge, because that's the most historic storm surge that we have in the province that was measured and targeted, which is 1.63 centimeters. Altogether, calculating those factors, and which does not include wave occurrence or anything like that. If we were including the wave reoccurrence, the number would have been higher. We only used 3 factors, which was a storm surge, sea level rise by 2100, and it was not the most extreme scenario. It was a 95 percentile, which our Queens Municipality has been using, Mahone Bay has been using, and Town of Lunenburg has been using that numbers, along with other municipalities in the province. And we also have been using storm surge, so spring tides. So those are the 3 numbers that we calculated together to base the 3.97 meters. The sea level rise number we also received from Climate Atlantic, and it was fact-checked by Natural Resources Canada as being the most valid information out there right now. So yes, the province does have their recommendations of what sea level rise looks like, but they're using an older data set in comparison to the data set that we have here. So that's the questions to that. In regards to whether the council or the committee wants to provide recommendation to council to reopen coastal, that's up to the committee to decide. They can provide that recommendation. It's up to council to decide eventually if to direct staff to reopen the coastal protection regulations. Staff has provided an annual report back in September to council and presented and showed that until now, the regulations were as intended. We didn't take any development out of any property out of development. So developments had occurred since the regulations came into effect since 2024. The flood risk area is not a no-build zone. It's just an area that shows where flood risk might occur within this time to 2100. You can still develop there as long as the habitable space meets that elevation requirement. And that elevation requirement, the 3.97 meters, is not measured from where you're standing. It's measured from CGVD 2013. So it's a measuring datum that usually surveyors use to measure where the elevation happens. So it actually could be up. It could actually be from that point here. So it's not necessarily from the ground of where you're standing, that 4 meters elevation requirement that you need to maintain. As we've shown, it did not take any properties out of development. Any existing properties can expand up to 100% of the existing footprint. And thus, due to to show that the coastal protection regulations, the erosion risk area, the flood risk area, and the sensitive coastal ecosystem that are all part of the coastal protection regulations show that they worked as intended. We recommended council back in September or November of 2025 to not reopen the policies right now, but to revisit it in 2029, where we will have newer data, and we'll be able to base that rationale on those coastal regulations. Back at that date, council did pass that motion.
Thank you, Ella. I'm not quite sure. No, I can't. No, I'm sorry. No, I'm so sorry.
Unless you'd have to change the rule. You'd have to suspend the rules by unanimous vote of the committee. You'd have to suspend the rules by the unanimous vote of the committee.
Should I do that?
I can ask.
In order to let Mr. Sutherland speak, I would have to have a unanimous vote in favor from the committee, from a motion from the committee to suspend the rules. Does anybody want to make that motion? Mr. Mailman.
I'll make the motion as long as we limit it to one question.
And that's your motion, okay?
The motion, yeah.
Okay. Seconder? Seconded by Mayor Elspeth McLean-Weil. All those in favor? Okay. Mr. Sutherland, you can come on up.
I'm Jay Sutherland. She's very smart.
She is very smart, thank you.
Very, very smart. I just wanted to Point out that it's not a debate on whether or not there is the science. The
You have
debate-
to address the chair, sir.
You can
Yeah.
raise your table.
Raise your table up.
Thank you very much. The issue is the insurance, CMHC financing. That when you guys imposed this, you didn't consider what the impact was going to be for CMHC financing or for lending. And unfortunately, MODL didn't consult with any of the regulated bodies when they came up with these amounts. To wait 4 years is a long time for a lot of other homeowners that are impacted by a map that shows that you're underwater, as in Dave's position where initially with the 3.20 or 302 doesn't show that it's impacted. So we're just asking one simple thing, wave run-up scientists, let us have a wave run-up scientists tell us what our property can and can't have so that we're not subjected to a global, sorry? Blanket, thank you. So I start to get pacey mouth. Now I got to leave. But that's it from me, okay? So please just consider that because that's the issue.
Thank you, Mr. Sutherland. Just open it up again. Okay. Do we have further debate and discussion on draft number 2? Mr. Melman.
Yeah, that was, first part of my question was answered. The second part of my question was, though, where this is, my understanding was this Planning Advisory Committee's agenda was to either approve draft 2 of the land use bylaws or not approve, but this is something that was, what has been asked by the public, has something that's already been passed by council. Can the land use bylaw, can the PAC committee, is it their mandate tonight to make a recommendation if we see fit to ask council to change that as part of the land use bylaws? Or does council have to look at that individually? I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I can try to make answer that question. I guess the way that, so we have an existing land use bylaw in effect now. That's what has the coastal protection regulations in it, as well as cluster development and a few other minimal pieces. And with the way that that's being treated is that document is then, some of that text is being carried over into this document unchanged. So everything that's in this new document is what the committee would be recommending. And that does include all of those coastal protection regulations that are just carried forward. So it is certainly up for acceptance and debate and then approval at the end, because it does form part of this new document. It's not a separate one in that way.
Continue? Okay. Mayor McClainwell.
Yeah, just to further to Mr. Mailman's comment, my concern with reconsideration of the coastal protection regulation is that we had intense public engagement on looking at this municipal planning strategy. And at every meeting, we said that the coastal protection regulations had been adopted, and they were. There was an 18-month process to put the coastal protection regulations in place. And at all those meetings to date, we have said that the coastal protection regulations are in place. They will be incorporated into the municipal planning strategy, and that piece of the work has been completed and adopted by council in June of 2024. So for us to, and said, and I think the council of the day changed the regulations around the consideration around when it would be reviewed, which normally would be every 10 years, and it was agreed to review it in 5 years, which is the dates that have been presented by staff. My concern is opening this up when we told everyone for a year that these were the regulations. They are in place. As far as we were getting reports as council, they were working as they were intended to do. And so we've been we have really, as a council, to date, and with our public that we've met, set that discussion aside. So this does present, the presentations we're hearing tonight and the communication we've gotten, with all respect to the folks that have these concerns, is that it does place us in a very difficult position as a council to, and for this committee to consider this when we told people for a year that this was in place and that we weren't considering it. So there's a lot of our public that might have also had ideas to consider about changes that we haven't entertained. I wanted that to be clear to everyone about the steps that have been taken and what we communicated to the public as we went around with that consultation, both the consultation in last year and the one that we had in March through April of this year.
Okay, in that case, I think I will right now ask for the motion to be put on the floor. Would you do that, Councillor Bell?
Can you put it back up on the screen?
I can't, but they can.
To the chairman, I move that the Planning Advisory Committee recommend that council approve the revisions recommended by planning staff noted in the discussion section of the report for inclusion in the third and final draft of the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw. I so move.
Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Mr. Drysdale. Discussion? Any more discussion on it? Discussion on the motion? Oh, Mr. Mailman.
Thank you. During the presentation, I made the comment that it didn't make any sense that if you're going to be able to subdivide potentially up to 6 times, but you're only going to allow somebody to do it twice in a calendar year, would that be considered, could the committee consider changing that? Because to me, that's just a cost override for somebody in permits, surveys, whatever. So if you're going to permit them to do it 6 times, why not permit them doing it the first time around?
Okay, so I think staff will note that, correct, Reed?
Yeah, if the motion was changed to add that piece, then we can certainly make that change. You know, I guess we're not making any changes yet. Once council will ultimately receive the recommendation, and the recommendation can include additions such as that, and then council can then pass that final vote and give us the direction to make the change.
So it has to be an amendment to the motion? Okay. Do you want to would you like to make that an amendment to the motion?
Usually when I make an amendment to the motion, it gets defeated, but
Try again.
but I think I might have a couple people that might be on my side in this one. So yes, I would like to make the amendment that part of the land use bylaw be changed to permit up to the total of 6 sections at any point in time, not in 2 in a calendar year.
And do I have a seconder for the amendment? Seconded by Councillor Smith. No discussion on the amendment, right? Is there any discussion on the amendment? Mayor McLean-Hall.
I would just like somebody to clarify why we did that.
It's mainly just to dissuade that incentive to do a lot of development. We want to try to strike a balance between recognizing people, they have their individual needs to subdivide lots for family members and things like that, versus going in with a development mindset and trying to use up as much farmland as possible. Having said that, I don't think, in our view, it's a substantial piece of the puzzle, and it's really not a major change. If the committee wanted to make their recommendation, we don't think it would have a major impact on the overall intent of the plan.
Councillor Smith.
I seconded the amendment and will vote in favor of it. But I do so also thinking that the cluster development part of this needs to be reconsidered. Because if we are, I can get behind, doing the subdivisions all at once, but if they all can have 12 unit cluster developments on them, then I'm not sure about that. And but as far as this amendment goes, I will support it, but I will be suggesting another one.
Any other questions? So right now, I'm going to ask for all those in favor of the amendment. There you go, Mr. Millman. And now I will ask those, any more debate on, I have to go back to the original motion, don't I?
Do you just want to know for the record that it passed?
Oh, yes, it passed unanimously. And now I will ask for the vote on, oh, go ahead.
So I need a little bit of advice here.
So this is on the original motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure what the options are here, but I am not in favor of the cluster development allowing 12 units in the RU2 zone. I see in the summary of policy changes, it doesn't actually say how many units. That's in the report. So are we recommending adding a policy to limit the location and size of cluster developments, but not specifying? Is that 12 a suggestion? Or is that to be deliberated on by council and we're not recommending an actual size?
Yeah, to
limit?
clarify, our draft text that we've been working on is working under the assumption of 12. So if it's helpful, a couple of approaches would be reducing that to, you could go with 6, which kind of brings it in line with the subdivision allowance. You could not allow it at all in that zone. So in terms of, if it's a concern about too much, I would say that the simplest way of looking at it would be just to reduce that number, or just outright say no cluster development in that zone.
Could I also make a recommendation that there be further research brought to council on these recommendations?
You can amend this motion for the second, you can do a second amendment if you like, and that will go with the motion to council, correct? Yes. And then council can debate your second amendment. Well, no, they can't debate your second amendment, but when council debates this draft 2 going into draft 3, the discussion will be had. Go ahead, Reed.
If it's helpful, in terms of additional work on that, there really isn't a lot of research and policy work on cluster developments in Atlantic Canada. So we kind of covered the gamut with that when we introduced the cluster development regulations a year or 2 ago. So we did research what's out there. There's very little particularly about agricultural land. So when we saw the policies in Colchester, that was very relevant for us, but I'm not aware of any other policies that exist that are of similar nature. So I think in terms of looking at what else is out there, that there really isn't much. I think we've seen what there is, and our suggestion would be just about in terms of just changing what the number of units are, or just outright not allowing it at all.
Mr. Millman?
I was just going to make a comment. Wouldn't it make the most sense to just say no to that, and then if somebody wanted to, they could enter into a development agreement, and then it would go to council to make that decision on an individual basis, and that would prevent things popping up that maybe people don't want, but if somebody does want it, well, then council can approve it.
It is written in as a development agreement, so that it would be the only way you could do that type of development. So it is already quite a hurdle to jump through. It's not permitted as of right. However, when something is permitted by development agreement, it means it is technically permitted. And council can't just outright say no. The way to say no would be to say it's not permitted at all, rather than saying by development agreement. So if you want to just say no, I would say remove the development agreement as an option and just say not available.
Is that another amendment then? Okay, did you want to make a second amendment? Somebody? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, you want to speak?
I would be happy to make an amendment.
Okay.
That says that we will not have cluster development in the agricultural zone.
Okay, moved by Mayor McLean-Wells, seconded by Councillor Bell. Discussion. Ready? All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Now, we are back to the main motion. The second amendment has been carried unanimously, so now we're back to the main motion to vote on. Are we ready to vote on the main motion, or do you want to discuss some more? Mr. Millman.
Thank you. I don't want to make any more amendments, but I didn't get a chance to ask for clarification and on a couple of things that was presented. And I totally respect what Mayor Al Smith McLean-Wild said about the coastal bylaws were already debated. But the comment was made by staff that other municipalities have adopted certain setbacks. I think Queens and Mahone Bay was mentioned. And forgive my ignorance, I don't know what those are. Are they the same as modal, or are they the same as the province?
So the vertical elevation setbacks for each municipality is differentiated based on the location that they are located in. So Silver Rise changes in terms of the number as you go. Also, when they adopted their policies, they used the older data set because they didn't have access to the newer data when they worked on their coastal regulations. However, when they based in terms of emission scenarios, you have different percentiles that you can choose to decide how to work with. You have the 50 percentile, you have the 95 percentile, and then you have the enhanced scenario, which considered to be the most extreme scenario, where you also calculate the option of Antarctic ice sheets completely melting, and then there's an extra 60 centimeters to the number. All municipalities chose the 95 percentile because that's the best practice to use. However, Silver Rise did range differently between municipality in terms of the coastal location that they're at.
That kind of answered my question, and I get that you probably wouldn't know each one off the top of your head, but my other part to this was that I think it was mentioned earlier that at any point in time, bylaws can be changed, and if there's enough public support, that could be changed even after if this draft number 2 is approved by this council.
Just to clarify, they also, all of them used Hurricane Juan as the storm surge number, so 1.63 meters. Queens Silver Rise is around 3.5 meters, and Town of Mahone Bay is around 3.25.
Okay, so I think that we might be ready for the vote on the original motion as amended. And all those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. And that is the end of our agenda, and it says here next meeting Thursday, May 28th, but I don't think that will be. Or will it?
Let's leave it there. We do have
Okay.
an item, but we need to get the information
Okay,
back.
yep,
So-
so stay tuned, right? All right, motion to adjourn? I can adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody.
Business having been conducted, this meeting is adjourned.